All right, so today we're diving deep into a book that I know you're going to find fascinating.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's called The Millionaire Next Door.
Classic.
It is a classic.
Yeah.
Thomas J. Stanley and William D. Danko. And I think it's going to be really relevant to you because you told me you're looking for some actionable insights into how to become financially independent.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't want to get lost in the weeds with
Right.
complicated financial jargon.
Exactly.
And this book really fits the bill.
Yeah.
And when we say The Millionaire Next Door, we're not talking about, the flashy billionaires you see on TV.
Right.
We're talking about regular, everyday people who you might not even realize have built serious wealth.
Your neighbors.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what we're going to do today is unpack some of the surprising traits and habits
Okay.
of these millionaires next door and hopefully extract some nuggets that you can apply in your own life.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, what I think is so cool about this book is that it's not based on anecdotes or speculation.
Right.
It's based on real hardcore research.
Yeah, solid research.
Yeah. These authors surveyed and interviewed, get this, over 500 millionaires
Wow.
from all across America.
Okay.
So we're talking Oklahoma,
Okay.
Texas,
Yeah.
New York City, Chicago.
So all walks of life, really.
Exactly.
Different industries, different geographies.
And what they found, which is, I think, particularly interesting, is that despite all that geographical diversity,
Okay.
the core values and approaches to building wealth were remarkably consistent.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
So there are some universal principles at play, it seems.
Yeah, and they also interviewed the advisors of these millionaires, like their CPAs,
Oh.
which gives us another really cool perspective.
Yeah, getting the inside scoop from the people who are managing the money.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
So let's jump right into one of the most surprising findings of the book.
Okay, I'm ready.
Are you ready for this?
Hit me.
Okay, so forget the flashy cars and the massive mansions. The authors found that a whopping 80 to 85% of millionaires are self-made.
Wow.
Oh.
So the vast majority didn't inherit their wealth.
Exactly.
They built it themselves.
They built it from the ground up. And what I think is really cool about that
Yeah.
is that it highlights the power of consistent effort and smart choices,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of your starting point.
Right. It's not about where you start. It's about the journey.
And that actually leads into another key point,
Okay.
which is that many of these millionaires actually emphasize that the process of building wealth,
Mm-hmm.
setting those financial goals, achieving those milestones, brought them more satisfaction
Yeah.
than simply being handed a fortune.
It's like the satisfaction of mastering a skill.
Totally.
Like you built this yourself.
Yeah, it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey.
Exactly.
So how do we even define wealthy?
Right. Good question.
It's not as simple as just saying, oh, you have $1 million in the bank.
Right, because you could have $1 million,
Right.
but you could be spending $2 million every year.
The book introduces this really useful concept of being wealthy in relation to others in your income age cohort.
Okay.
So it's not just about the absolute number.
Okay.
It's about, are you doing better financially than most people your age?
Okay, so it's relative wealth.
Yes, relative wealth, exactly.
Okay.
And they give us a great example in the book.
All right, let's hear it.
Charles Bobbins,
Charles Bobbins.
41-year-old fireman, married to a secretary,
Okay.
combined income about $55,000 a year.
Right.
Now, according to their research, someone in that situation statistically would be expected to have a net worth of around
Let me guess.
$225,500.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But the Bobbins family has accumulated significantly more than that.
So they're exceeding expectations
They are exceeding expectations.
based on their income and their age.
Exactly.
Oh, got it.
And as the book points out, this means Mr. Bobbins could potentially support his family for 10 years without working.
Wow. That's a comfortable cushion.
So within their income and age bracket, they're considered wealthy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now let's flip the script.
Yeah, okay.
We have James H. Forts II,
4. Okay.
51-year-old attorney,
Hey.
earning over $92,000 a year.
So higher income.
Much higher income.
Okay.
Now, based on that same idea of expected wealth,
Mm-hmm.
his net worth should have been around $470,000,
Okay.
but his actual net worth was closer to $226,000.
Oh, wow. So he's actually behind.
Yeah. So despite earning more and having more years of education,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Ford is classified as an under-accumulator of wealth.
Okay, so it really drives home the point that it's not just about how much you earn.
Right.
It's about what you do with it.
It's about how you manage it.
Yeah.
So what are the key traits and habits that set these prodigious accumulators of wealth, or PAWs?
Okay.
The book calls them PAWs.
Pause.
I like to think of them as wealth builders.
Wealth build. Okay.
Apart from those under accumulators of wealth or UAWs.
Okay, so pause versus UAWs.
Got it.
All right, I'm with you.
So one of the biggest things is frugality.
Okay.
In fact, the book dedicates an entire chapter to this
Okay.
called Frugal. Frugal. Frugal.
So they're not messing around.
I'm messing around.
They're really hammering that point home.
These millionaires often live quite comfortably, but well below their means.
Right. It's about living within your means, even when your means increase.
Exactly. And there's this great story in the book about a millionaire engineer
Okay.
and his wife, who was also an engineer.
Okay.
And early on, they decided to live on one income and save the other.
Smart.
Very smart. And what's even more remarkable is that they stuck with that, even as their salaries grew
Wow.
significantly over time.
So they didn't let lifestyle inflation creep in?
No, they kept their expenses relatively stable.
Okay.
And they lived in the same modest home for 2 decades.
Wow.
Their kids actually started to wonder if they were really wealthy because they were always,
Right.
hitting up the value menu.
The value menu millionaires.
Value menu millionaires. I love that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So, it really challenges that image of wealth being all about extravagant spending.
Right.
It's about the gap between your income and your spending.
Exactly. And maintaining that gap even as your income grows.
Exactly. And it's not just about clipping coupons. It's about how they allocate their time, their energy, and their money.
Okay.
These millionaires prioritize actively managing their assets.
Okay.
They spend a considerable amount of time planning their financial future, and their investments often more time than people who haven't accumulated that level of wealth.
So they're putting in the work.
They're putting in the work. And the book actually highlights a strong correlation
Okay.
between taking the time to plan your investments and how much wealth you end up building.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's true even for people with middle-level incomes.
So it's not just for the already wealthy.
No, it's for everyone.
It's about taking control of your finances.
Exactly.
Okay.
So here's another fascinating insight from the book. You aren't what you drive.
Oh, I like that.
It's a good one, right?
Yeah.
The book kind of dismantles this idea that wealthy people need to flaunt their status with expensive cars.
Okay.
And they tell this great story about a guy they call Mr. Bud.
Mr. Bud.
Mr. Bud, who is worth over $10 million.
All right, so a decamillionaire.
Decamillionaire. And get this, when offered a fancy vintage wine,
Okay.
he said he preferred Free and Budweiser.
Free and Budweiser. That's amazing.
That's Mr. Bud.
I love that guy.
I love that guy. And apparently his outward appearance gave no hint
Wow.
of his massive wealth.
So you wouldn't know just by looking at him.
No, you would have no idea.
Interesting.
And then there's Johnny Lucas,
Connie Lucas. Oh,
who's a business owner with a $2 million net worth.
Okay.
But he lives this completely ordinary middle-class life
Okay.
in a nice neighborhood.
Right.
So to his neighbors, he just blends right in.
Right. He's the millionaire next door.
He's the millionaire next door. Literally.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of wealth, his household ranks in the top 10% of his local area
Wow.
and the top 2% nationwide.
So you never know who your neighbors really are.
You really don't.
That's fascinating.
And this careful approach to spending extends to other areas too,
Okay, like what?
like clothing costs.
All right.
So the typical millionaire in their survey never spent more than $399 on a suit.
Wow. I spend more than that on jeans.
Right.
Yeah.
Half of them paid $399 or less for their most expensive suit,
Okay.
and only a tiny fraction spent over $1,000.
Wow. Okay.
And what's interesting is that the self-made millionaires tend to spend even less
Oh, interesting.
on clothing than those who inherited their money.
So the ones who built it themselves are more careful with their spending.
They're more frugal,
Makes sense.
like Johnny Lucas, for example.
Yeah.
He buys his suits at JCPenney.
JCPenney. Okay.
So the authors contrast this with the idea of bespoke suits.
Right. Those custom-made suits.
Yeah, and having this, unique and personal relationship with clothes.
Right. Like your clothes are an extension of your personality.
Right, but for millionaires,
Yeah.
it seems like practicality and value are way more important than status or expressing themselves through, high-end fashion.
They're not trying to impress anyone.
No.
They're focused on what the clothing does for them.
Exactly.
Not the label.
And the same principle applies to accessories.
Okay.
Wristwatches, for example.
Right.
Half of the millionaires they surveyed never spent more than $235 on a wristwatch.
Wow. Some people spend that on a single watch strap.
I know, it's crazy, right? And many spent considerably less.
So again, it's about functionality, not fashion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about telling time, not making a statement.
Got it.
Now, here's something that the book really emphasizes.
Okay.
The importance of having a frugal spouse.
Oh, interesting.
They found that in most millionaire households, both individuals are careful with money.
Okay.
And often the spouse is even more frugal than the primary income earner.
So they're the ones holding the purse strings tight.
Yeah, they're the financial gatekeepers.
I like it.
There's this great quote in the book from a self-made millionaire.
Okay, what'd he say?
He said, "I can't get my wife to spend any money."
That's amazing.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And then they tell this story about a millionaire's wife who continued to clip coupons,
No way.
even after her husband gave her $8 million worth of stock.
Wow, that's commitment.
That's dedication.
Yeah, she's a true paw.
She is a paw.
A prodigal accumulator of wealth.
So it really highlights the importance of shared financial values in building long-term wealth.
It's like having a built-in accountability partner.
Exactly. You're on the same page financially.
Right.
And it's not just about, having a general sense of being careful with money.
Okay.
The book also emphasizes the importance of actual financial planning.
Right. You got to have a plan.
A majority of millionaires operate on an annual budget. They carefully plan their spending across different categories.
Makes sense.
Now, even those who don't have a formal written budget
Okay.
often create what the authors call an artificial economic environment of scarcity.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
It's essentially a self-imposed rule.
Okay.
You save a significant chunk first,
Okay.
often at least 15% of your income,
You're right.
and then you live on whatever's left.
So it's like paying yourself first.
It is pay yourself first.
Got it.
So by prioritizing saving and investing
Mm-hmm.
right off the bat.
You create a natural limit on your spending,
Exactly.
even if you could technically afford to spend more.
You're setting up those guardrails.
Those financial guardrails. I love that.
The financial guardrails.
Okay, so we talked about frugality. We talked about planning.
Mm-hmm.
What about investing?
Investing. That's a big one.
Yeah.
And the book dives into how many millionaires approach their investments.
Okay.
And one thing that stood out to me is that they often stick to what they know.
Okay, so they're not just blindly following the latest trend.
No, they're leveraging their expertise.
Okay.
So many millionaires invest in areas where they already have knowledge, and they often connect their business knowledge
Mm-hmm.
with their investment decisions.
So it's like they're their own investment analysts.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And so, for example, they mention an auctioneer
Okay.
who specialized in commercial real estate.
Okay.
And guess what he invested in?
Commercial real estate.
Commercial real estate.
Oh, yeah.
He's using his understanding of the market to make informed investment choices.
Right. He's not just throwing darts at a board.
Exactly.
He's doing his research.
Now, the book also sheds light on the other side of the coin.
Okay, the UAWs.
UAWs, the under-accumulators of wealth.
All right.
And they introduce us to this character named Mr. Friend
Mr. Friend. Okay.
as a prime example of someone who prioritizes high consumption
Okay.
to project an image of success.
All right.
Now, what's really interesting here is that for Mr. Friend, having a high income wasn't about building long-term security.
Okay.
It was about trying to overcome this feeling of social inferiority.
Oh, interesting.
He felt this need to display his high income
Okay.
through things like expensive private schools for his kids,
Okay.
luxury cars, high-end clothing.
So it's about keeping up with the Joneses.
It's about keeping up with the Joneses.
Got it.
And the idea of building an investment portfolio for the future
Mm-hmm.
didn't seem to be a priority for him.
It was all about the present moment.
Yeah, living for today.
Okay.
And it wasn't just Mr. Friend's way of thinking.
Okay.
His parents also played a role in shaping these habits.
Really?
They basically taught him to prioritize spending over saving and investing.
Okay.
Their financial plan was pretty simple. Spend when you have money, stop when you don't.
So no long-term vision.
No long-term planning.
Got it.
And the authors really highlight the impact of what might seem like small, everyday habits.
Okay.
They use the example of Mr. Friend's parents' smoking habit. They smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
3 packs a day. Wow.
3 packs a day.
That's a lot.
And over their lifetime, that seemingly small expense
Mm-hmm.
added up to a huge amount of money.
Right. All those packs add up.
Money that could have been invested
Right.
and grown significantly over time.
So those daily decisions really matter.
They really do.
Okay.
Another key difference between the wealth builders and the under-accumulators
Yeah.
is how they think about their income.
Okay.
Millionaires often focus on minimizing their realized income
Realized income.
or taxable income
Okay.
and maximizing their unrealized income.
Unrealized income. So that's like the growth in the value of their asset.
Exactly. The growth that's not taxed until you actually sell those assets.
Okay, I'm following you.
So income tax, as the book points out, is often the single biggest annual expense
Makes sense.
for most households.
Yeah.
So by focusing on growing wealth in a way that's not immediately subject to income tax, millionaires can build their net worth much more efficiently over time.
Yeah, you're letting that money compound tax-free
Exactly.
for as long as possible.
So think of unrealized income as the value of your investments growing
Okay.
without you selling them yet.
So no taxes to pay on that growth yet.
Right.
Okay.
And they give this great comparison in the book.
Okay.
Sharon and Barbara,
Sharon and Barbara.
both earning around $220,000 a year.
Okay. Same income level.
Same income level.
Right.
But Sharon has a much lower net worth
Okay.
because a larger portion of her wealth is subject to income tax every year.
Oh, so she's realizing more of her income.
Exactly.
Okay.
Whereas Barbara, with a similar income but a much higher net worth, pays a much smaller percentage of her wealth in federal income tax.
So she's focusing on that unrealized income.
Exactly.
Got it.
It really illustrates the power of that tax advantage growth.
It makes a big difference over time.
Huge difference.
Okay.
And this difference in their financial philosophy also shows up in how they allocate their time.
Okay.
So the pause, those wealth builders,
Right.
they spend significantly more time planning their financial investments
Okay.
compared to the under-accumulators of wealth.
So the UAWs are often too busy for their finances.
Yeah, they feel like they don't have the time.
It seems counterintuitive, though, right?
No, it does.
You'd think the higher earners would be more on top of their finances.
You think?
But the book suggests it's the opposite.
Yeah, the people who are really good at building wealth, they make time for it.
They prioritize it.
They prioritize it.
Interesting.
And the book also really emphasizes the advantage of starting to earn and invest early in adulthood.
Okay, so time is on your side.
Time is your biggest ally.
Got it.
Even people who weren't necessarily academically gifted in their younger years can often build more wealth than those who spent many more years in higher education
Okay.
and started later.
Interesting.
It's about getting started and letting that compounding work its magic.
The power of compound.
The power of compounding.
Okay.
I give this great example in the book.
Okay.
Mr. Denzi.
Mr. Denton.
He started working after finishing technical school at 22,
Okay.
and he went on to amass significant wealth.
All right.
Then there's Dr. Dokes,
Dr. Dokes?
who spent many years in higher education
Okay.
and started earning and investing much later. And despite having a similar income,
Okay.
he has significantly less wealth.
So Mr. Denzi got a head start, and that made all the difference.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now, you might think that living in a really high-status, affluent neighborhood is a sure sign of wealth.
Right.
But the book actually suggests that it can sometimes hinder wealth accumulation
Really?
if people prioritize the appearance of wealth
Okay.
over true financial independence.
So it's about keeping up with the Joneses again.
Yeah, you're trying to project this image of wealth,
Right. Yeah.
but you're not actually building real wealth.
Okay.
And they point out that millionaires who do happen to live in more affluent areas, they still tend to spend only a small percentage of their overall wealth each year.
Okay.
Unlike their non-affluent neighbors who often need to spend a much larger chunk of their income just to keep up with that lifestyle.
To maintain that facade.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this brings us to how they approach buying cars.
Cars. All right.
Another area where the book highlights the contrasting behaviors of PAWs and UAWs.
Okay.
So we have Dr. South, who's not a millionaire,
Okay.
but he spends a ton of time and energy trying to negotiate the absolute lowest dealer cost on luxury vehicles.
Okay.
Whereas most millionaires,
Yeah.
they use simpler bargain shopping techniques
Right.
and often buy used cars.
So they're not chasing the newest model.
No, they're looking for value.
Okay.
And there's this great story about Dr. North,
Dr. North.
who's a true wealth builder,
Okay. A paw.
a PAW.
Yeah.
He bought a 3-year-old Mercedes-Benz,
All right.
and he plans to keep his cars for a long time.
So he's not constantly upgrading?
No, he's focused on value over status.
Got it.
He's not concerned with having the newest model or the most prestigious brand.
Right.
Now, the book also introduces this really interesting concept called economic outpatient care,
Economic outpatient care.
or EOC,
EOC. Okay. Yeah.
which refers to financially comfortable parents
Mm-hmm.
providing significant ongoing support
Okay.
to their adult children.
Right.
And while it might seem like a loving and helpful thing to do,
Right.
The authors actually argue that it often has some unintended negative consequences.
Really? So it's
Yeah.
like enabling almost.
It can be,
Okay.
because while parents might have the best intentions,
Right. They want to help their kids get a good start.
exactly,
Right.
but this continuous financial support
Yeah.
can actually hinder the children's own wealth-building efforts
Oh, interesting.
and increase their dependence.
So it backfires.
It can backfire.
Okay.
And they give this really vivid example in the books.
Right.
Mary and Lamar.
Mary and Lamar.
They live this very lavish lifestyle.
Largely funded by Mary's mother's ongoing contributions.
So they're living beyond their means,
Exactly.
thanks to mom and dad.
Thanks to mom.
Okay.
And the research actually shows that adult children who receive these kinds of gifts
Mm-hmm.
across various professions
Okay.
often have a lower net worth
Right.
compared to their peers who don't.
So the financial help actually hurts them in the long run.
It can.
Wow.
And it's not just about the money itself.
Okay.
Even gifts of expensive items can trigger more spending
Oh, interesting.
and create this cycle of reliance.
So it's like a slippery slope?
It can be.
Yeah, okay.
And the book outlines several reasons why this might be the case.
Okay, why is that?
So, children who receive regular financial support from their parents
Mm-hmm.
might not have a clear distinction
Okay.
between their own money and their parents' money.
Right, it's all just money.
It's all just money, which can lead to higher spending habits.
Makes sense.
They also tend to be more reliant on credit.
And they may not prioritize saving and investing as much.
So they're not developing those essential financial skills.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like that safety net can actually discourage the development of self-reliance.
Interesting. So it's almost like a form of learned helplessness.
Yeah, you're not forced to figure it out on your own.
Right. You always have that backup.
So what are some of the lessons that these millionaires have learned when it comes to raising their own children
Okay, good question.
to be economically successful?
Yeah. How do they break that cycle?
So the book concludes by outlining several key principles
Okay, I'm listening.
they tend to follow.
Okay.
And one of the big ones is being very careful not to tell their children that the family is wealthy.
Oh, that's interesting.
They want their kids to develop a strong work ethic.
Right, not a sense of entitlement.
Exactly.
Okay.
They also teach them the importance of discipline and frugality from a young age.
Instilling those values early on.
Yes, those are core values.
Okay.
They emphasize the value of achievement and hard work
Okay.
over simply consuming things.
So it's not about material possessions.
No, it's about building something.
Got it.
And crucially, they avoid getting too involved in their adult children's family and financial decisions.
Oh, so they let them make their own mistakes.
I let them learn from their own experiences.
Okay.
And they tell this really powerful story in the book
All right, let's hear it.
about two sisters, Sarah and Alice.
To Sarah and Alice. Okay.
So Sarah actually became a self-made millionaire
Wow.
after her father cut off financial support.
So she had to sink or swim.
She had no choice but to figure it out,
Okay.
and she thrived.
Good for her.
But her sister Alice,
Yeah.
she remained financially dependent on her parents
Because of that ongoing EOC.
because that ongoing EOC, that economic outpatient care.
Got it.
So it really highlights the importance of letting your children experience that connection
Right.
between their efforts and their financial outcomes.
It's about teaching them self-sufficiency.
Exactly.
Okay.
So to kind of bring it all together,
Yeah, let's recap.
the millionaires next door aren't just people with high incomes.
Mm-hmm.
They're defined by this consistent lifestyle
Okay.
of frugality, careful planning, and a real focus on building wealth
Yeah.
and security
Yeah.
rather than just showing off.
Not about keeping up with the Joneses.
Not about keeping up with the Joneses.
Got it.
And, as we've discussed, the actual journey of saving and investing
Right.
and reaching those financial milestones seems to be a huge source of satisfaction for them.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly.
Okay.
And some of the key takeaways here
Yeah.
are prioritizing your needs over your wants,
Mm-hmm.
being strategic about how you spend your money even on big purchases like cars,
Right.
and understanding the potential downsides of relying too much on future income
Yeah.
or ongoing parental support.
So basically taking control of your financial future.
Yes, being proactive and responsible.
Got it.
Now, for me, one of the most surprising insights from the book
Yeah.
is the emphasis on inconspicuous consumption
Inconspicuous consumption.
and just how many truly wealthy individuals
Yeah.
live lives that on the surface
Mm-hmm.
really blend in with the middle class.
Right. They're not flashy.
No, they're not trying to impress anyone.
Okay.
Their focus is on financial independence and security, not on keeping up with the Joneses.
They're flying under the radar.
Exactly.
Okay.
So going back to what you're hoping to get out of this deep dive.
Yeah. Host speaker.